When you have a great game of two really good teams, all you want to do is have a rematch when it's all done. Well, that's what we had in 1948, a rematch of the 1947 championship when two teams collide and a little bit of revenge. And I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but I've got a Frankfurt Yellow Jacket t-shirt on. That's from our guest tonight, courtesy of Scheib Vintage Sports. Brian Michael joins us to talk about the 1948 NFL season and a championship team from his city coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome back to our series on pre-Super Bowl NFL championships. And we are having a blast. We're going through about the first dozen or 15 seasons of championship games, and we are all the way up to the 1948 season, and running strong and having some great times doing it with some great guests. And that is no exception today. We have a great guest who's actually a returning guest to the Pig Pen from a few years ago. You may have heard him on our Frankfurt Yellow Jackets podcast, and we'll get more into that in a second because he's got some new connections to that team. His name is Brian Michaels from the city of Philadelphia. Brian, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Hi, Darren. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, yeah, we are glad to have you, Brian. And, we know you got a few things cooking here. Maybe you could give us just a gloss over and we'll get into more detail here after we talk about the 48 and 49 seasons.
Sure. Yeah, of course. As I mentioned last time I was on, I'm the owner of Scheib Vintage Sports here in Philadelphia, which is a throwback sports retailer. So we specialize in all of Philly sports history, the main teams, the defunct teams, and all the fun stories that you guys talk about on the podcast. So that's kind of my sports background. I'm from Philadelphia, so obviously I'm a four fan, and in 2022, I published a book on the Philadelphia Eagles. I have it right here. And from the research in that book, we found a lot of Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, archives, game programs, memorabilia, football, flags, actual pieces from the team, counting ledgers, all this great information at the Frankfurt Historical Society that we decided that we had to do another book just on the Yellow Jackets. So that's what we've been working on the past couple of years. I actually just sent it all to the publisher, and it should be out in the fall. So I would love to talk more about that. But today it's Eagles, and this year it's Eagles. It's a big year for the Eagles winning championships, and today we're going to talk about their first.
Yeah, most definitely. The connections are endless here with a great team and great season they had here in 2024. But you go back to the Frankfurt thing. That's actually how you and I got connected. I was looking to do a story on Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. I contacted the Historical Society down there, and they said, "Hey, you want to talk to this guy? He's been nosing around in the books and knows quite a bit about it." And so we appreciate them for helping out that too. So they're carrying on the history of their area and region quite well and letting us historians help tell the story. So great job by them. So what can you tell us about the 1948 season and how Philadelphia fits into it?
Sure. Well, the Eagles were kind of at a turning point in a good way. They started in 1933. For 10 years, they had losing seasons. They just couldn't get it together. Fourth, fifth place, the basement. They finally turned it around with the Steagles in 1943 with a 5-4-1 season. And then finished second place the next 3 years. So they started to get better players. They hired Greasy Neal as a coach in 1944. So that was a big move towards professionalization, and the players really loved him as a coach and brought the team together. And then in 1947, they finished first in the NFL East Division, went on to the championship game, lost to the Cardinals, 28-21, as you guys talked about, on that frozen field up in Chicago. The weather plays a part in the 1948 season and championship as well as the 49. But the 48 season, to answer your question, they were riding high. Things were on a positive note. Yes, they lost the championship game, but for the first time in a long time, they were good, right? So that was exciting. And this was the start of, you could say, a mini Eagles dynasty, and one that, kind of had to carry the team for the next decade till they were successful again. It's kind of peaks and valleys with the Eagles history. But this was their first big peak as a franchise, heading into the 48 season.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Our guest on the 47 season, Joe Ziemba, with the first Cardinals Eagles matchup in the championship game, we were talking about it, because these were the first time for both of these teams being in a championship game. And actually, I believe it's the first championship game since 33 where it wasn't the Redskins, Giants, Packers, or Bears in it.
That's
So
right.
that was made it kind of a unique and special too. And now the other thing that's unique is these two teams, along with the Steelers, had these merged teams just a couple years earlier, and were basically cellar dwellers. And with the infusion of great talent coming out of the war, and kids out of college, and some great coaching, like Greasy Neal coming to the Eagles, all three of them in 47, they're postseason, playing in the postseason, because it's the first sort of playoff game or play-in game in the NFL history when the Eagles and the Steelers tie, and then the Cardinals and the Eagles in the championship, a few years in a row, and that's just awesome, playing against each other, and the Eagles much more after that. So really cool how the abrupt face of the peril of these teams turns into some great fortune.
Yes, yes, definitely. There was a lot of kind of turmoil, like you said, with the rosters, certainly during World War II, but after as well. But the Eagles did have their fair share of veteran players, literal veterans from the war. Pete Pios, Chuck Bednarik, who was drafted in 49, Al Wissert as well. So, they benefited from having those guys, not at war in the whole country and on the football field.
Yeah, wow. I mean, just some great names you say right there. There's an all-star of the Hall of Fame squad right there. So no wonder they were so good.
Exactly. Like I said, it was one of the first times, they had some of these star players. And, I didn't even mention yet Steve Van Buren, right? Who was kind of the Saquon Barkley, if you will, of the 47, 48, 49 season. Wham Bam Van Buren. He was a halfback from Honduras. That the Eagles drafted, and was their star player for all those seasons, as well as in the championship games, and really kind of catapulted them to victory. Hall of Famer, of course, too.
Yeah, and you can't go wrong with him, in Concrete Charlie, and everything else. Just some great names and players back at legends of the game that are still talked about here. We're almost 90 some years afterwards. So definitely some great people. So how did these guys, what's sort of the story of how they were put together as a team?
Um, Yeah, like I said, a lot of it came through the draft. As some of them were local guys. Chuck Bednarik, obviously, people knew from the University of Pennsylvania. Greasy Neal was familiar with the city and the region because he played for the Phillies. So he was a baseball.
Mhm.
The coach was a baseball player for the Phillies and the 1919 Reds, of course. So that was a big part of it. Greasy Neal, his experience in sports, both in baseball and football, his managing style, which was very, well, one, foul-mouthed,
Mhm.
with famously, but in a way laid back, friendly with the players, joked around with the players, but also very creative. He was a defensive genius, right? This is well before Buddy Ryan was here in town. And, he had different schemes, different setups that people never saw before, let alone, introducing player scouting and film studies, and things like that. So, he was a real revolutionary. So I think it started at the top with Greasy Neal, and he was brought on by their owner, Alexis Thompson, who as you've probably discussed before, used to own the Steelers, and then they swapped franchises and later became the Eagles owner, also a veteran as well. So he had the team, interestingly enough, up until after the 48 season, which, not to get ahead of ourselves, the Eagles won the championship game, and then he promptly sold the team afterwards. So very interesting in that regard too.
Yeah, that's one of those little secrets that I live in Western Pennsylvania and I'm a Steelers fan, but most Steelers fans don't realize that the Rooneys didn't continuously own the Steelers since '33. There was that brief; it was only a couple months, but where Burt Bell and Art Rooney end up doing the switcheroo with Alexis and changing teams.
Yep.
So
That's a whole nother podcast.
yeah, it definitely is, but kind of an interesting story in itself that you bring up.
Definitely. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of those interesting parts during the season. Burt Bell was the commissioner of football at the time. So a lot of things were kind of aligning for the Eagles to be good finally. They were playing over at Shibe Park, which they were regularly selling out at the time, which held about 39,000 people up in North Philadelphia. But it was growing in the city as well. We talked about the Yellow Jackets, which was a big part of pro football history in Philadelphia, but Philly was also really big into college football. University of Pennsylvania, Penn, Villanova, Temple, Lafayette, and Lehigh, Penn State, of course, all really close by. And, those, for a lot of different reasons, some of those teams were no longer as good. And now, pro football was becoming more popular in Philadelphia, and people were going to the games. And Ray Didinger, a Hall of Fame journalist here in Philadelphia, famously says, after the 1960 championship game, that's when Philadelphia became an Eagles city, right? That is by far, the top sport here in town. So, things were kind of building to this point, and I think, like we said, Greasy Neal was a big part of that, bringing that professionalism to the game. But like I said, having Hall of Famers like Steve Van Buren, Pete Pios helped as well. Their quarterback, Tommy Thompson, which you may have mentioned before, was blind in one eye, right? But that didn't stop him. He didn't tell a lot of people. He didn't tell the team at first, and he ended up winning the 2 championships with the team as quarterback. So it certainly didn't hinder his efforts on the field.
No, that's a great story when you have a little bit less vision than everybody else you're playing against, and you're playing at the highest level of
It's
football,
amazing.
and you're winning everything. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell us so who's the main competition for Philadelphia in 48 in the East?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's always Giants, Washington are big, and they really always had trouble with some of the Western teams, Chicago Bears in particular. Actually, in the 49 season, that was their only loss, right? And to be honest, they didn't have much trouble at all with the league and the division. They were 9-2-1 in 1948, and then 11-1 in 1949. So only 3 losses over those 2 seasons, in addition to 11 shutouts over those 2 seasons. Now, we had a famous restaurant here in Philadelphia called Bookbinders, which was like a seafood and steak place, and they offered players and their families free dinner for every shutout that they had during the season and the postseason. So over those 3 years, between 47 and 49, they had 11 shutouts. So to be honest, there wasn't really much competition there in their division. And again, that was rare.
That isn't why the restaurant is no longer with us, is it? They didn't go bankrupt feeding all these football players
Yeah,
so many
no, they
times.
lasted for a long time. That was the place to see and be seen. A lot of pro sports deals with Ed Snyder and the Sixers and Jerry Woolman and all that back a little bit later. All that happened at Bookbinders, so really famous place.
Yeah, what a great promotion. You know, if you're a fan, I mean, they wouldn't be able to do it nowadays because people would be trying to get reservations in there because they know the team won and trying
Yeah.
to see them while they're eating. But yeah, great promotion, great story. So okay, so yes, I see, they figure a few games ahead of Washington that year, I believe, right? Was that who it was? Yeah, we got a guy of the Redskins who were perennially in the championship game, as we just discussed earlier,
Hmm.
like 4 or 5 times the previous half decade. Um, so overcoming them is quite a bit, and it looks like their losses were, like you said, they were against the Chicago Cardinals out in the West. They tie the Rams out in the West, and losing to their loss was to the Boston Yanks, who were in the East, but that's sort of one of those end of the year things. They probably had everything all sewn up by then, and
Hmm.
one of those things like we sort of have today. So great season. So
But those are the teams. I mean, those you'll see those teams coming up. Those Western teams. So they've kind of built a little bit of a rivalry with the Chicago Cardinals, and you'll see the Rams, as we'll talk about.
yeah. So well, why don't you take us into the game? What happens in the 48 game?
Not much. It snowed. It was a blizzard. Right? It was the
Same
48.
old for these championship games, right?
Yeah, right. This Super Bowl this year was not as exciting as the first Super Bowl for the Eagles, a blowout. But this was not. This was a low scoring game at Shibe Park in the blizzard. Um, so much so that Steve Van Buren thought the game would be canceled. He didn't even show up on time. He had to take, I think it was like 3 trolleys and walk a couple of blocks, miles in the snow to get to the game. But obviously, in the snow, in those kind of poor weather conditions, you need your halfback, you need your star running back. So Van Buren was there. He scored the only touchdown. It was a 7-0 victory for the Eagles over the Cardinals. The Cardinals famously fumbled the ball, I think on the 2 yard line. To
Mm.
set up the Eagles score. And we have a really interesting photo in our book, which I'll share with you guys. It was a cartoon in one of the local papers with all the snow and a big Saint Bernard kind of delivering the Eagles the championship, kind of rescuing everyone in the snow, and the officials are off in the background, kind of looking at each other, saying, "I can't see anything." So it was one of those snowy games. Freezing cold, so the players didn't make a lot of money off the gate receipts, so that was a big deal. That it was I forget the number, but it was a pittance. The crowd, I think, was about 28,000 out of 36 was announced for the paid attendance. So um, the touchdown didn't come until a minute left in the fourth quarter. So the
Oh,
game was a lot of nothing. Um, Kind of exciting at the end, of course, certainly for the Eagles and Eagles fans. But it was cold, it was snowy. It was one of those games that probably more people said that were there than actually showed up that day.
not to put you on the spot because I don't know the answer to this either, but think about it back then. You're late in the game. Let's say the Cardinals don't fumble and it ends up being scoreless at the end of the game. They probably play some kind of an overtime or extra session, maybe till somebody wins. I don't know what the rules were back then.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe
Sort of
replay the game.
unprecedented. I don't think they had it happen on any other game I can think of.
It seems like they just played the games, or they would either continue, and certainly the weather didn't stop the teams. Like I said, the 47, the field was frozen out in Chicago. This was a blizzard. The following year was a rainstorm. So,
Hmm.
neither rain nor sleet or snow are going to stop the NFL championship game in the
Yeah.
40s. But
Yeah.
again, it certainly wasn't as big a deal as the Super Bowl, right? We know this. The players weren't getting paid as much. The sponsors weren't as huge. The crowds weren't as big. So, not going to the game because it was snowing was probably a smart decision back then, and not a lot of people may not have missed it as much as they came to realize later in the years. But yeah, it really wasn't as big of a thing, and the Phillies were actually getting good at this time too. So it was still a baseball town in terms of pro sports at this time.
And of course, the Athletics are still in Philadelphia too at
Yep.
that time. So yeah, big
Oh,
sports town then too. So
yep.
yeah.
Yep. So again, and they all played at Shibe Park, which is the reason we named our store after the place.
Okay, I was going to ask that connection. I couldn't remember quite well what the story was on that. So that's pretty neat. Now, is your store located near like where Shibe used to be, or?
Not quite. Shibe was at 21st and Lehigh. We're at 13th and Walnut. 2-3 miles at most. But it's all the stadiums have since moved to South Philly, where there's a lot more room, less densely populated, where the stadiums used to be. I mean, when they first built Shibe Park, it was farmland, and now it's row homes. So it's there's no room for a stadium there anymore.
Okay, and why don't we just as we're talking about it, why don't you give some information? We'll flash it up on the screen here too, where people can visit if they want to look and see what you guys have to offer at Shibe.
Sure. Yeah. Anyone can go visit us online at shibesports.com. That's SHIBE sports.com. But we also have our location in Center City, Philadelphia, which just celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year.
Oh,
And we have,
congrats.
thank you. We have spots out in Wayne, Westchester, and Ardmore, west of the city as well. So you can get all your Phillies, Eagles, Flyers, Sixers, Yellow Jackets, Maroons gear in the store on the website. So definitely come check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And folks, if you're driving, don't have a pen and pencil, don't worry. We're going to put it into the show notes of both the podcast and the YouTube channel, so you can come back at your leisure, give you a link, and get connected with Brian and Shibe Vintage Sports. Catch all their great gear that they have there for you. And you have some of your books in there too, so that's another good feature to have. We're going to interrupt this conversation right here, right now, and we're going to resume on Thursday, May 1st, when we talk with Brian and continue this conversation about the 1949 season and the Philadelphia Eagles. So stay tuned for that and some more on Shibe Vintage Sports. It's all coming up Thursday here on Pigskin Dispatch. That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.